All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Papillion La Vista Community Schools Board of Education meeting for October 25th, 2021. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you all. Moving on to item B under section 1, call to order. Roll call, please.
Ms. Witt. Here. Mr. Bailey.
Here.
Mr. Madler.
Here.
Dr. Coyle. Present. Ms. Fisher.
Here.
Ms. Lovett.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. I'd like to give notice to the open meetings law that is posted at the entrance to the boardroom. Again, for those maybe new in attendance this evening or watching on YouTube this evening, again, we continue to hold our meetings in public. Again, this is a board meeting held in public, not a public meeting. So we do respect all board members and those in attendance to have proper board decorum, and so we can continue and get through our board agenda for the evening. That concludes section 1, call to order. Moving on to section 2, communications. Item A is for public comment on items not on tonight's agenda. As it's fairly obvious in the agenda, obviously any comments related to masks or the mask guidelines for this district will be handled down in action items under item D. So we do have a few folks this evening that are speaking on items not on tonight's agenda. Again, this section shall not exceed 30 minutes unless a majority vote of the board approves extending the allocated time. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. When I call you up, please come to the microphone and seat up here. We need your first and last name and address as well for the record. All right, so to start off this evening, I will call up Lowen Eby. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Mr. Lotus, I have practiced my remarks for the past few days, and I'm over 20 seconds. May I request just a few extra seconds to complete my full remarks?
I would have to grant that to everyone if I made one exception. I mean, I do my best if it goes over. I let people go maybe 5, 6, 7 seconds, but that's all I can do. So I hope you understand I'm not trying to be difficult. I've held this standard for every meeting since I've been board president, so we got to keep it consistent for everybody. Okay. And again, yep, name and address for the record, and then Ms. Barenko's getting her timer as well, and I will keep mine.
Hello, my name is Lowen Eby. I reside at 1401 Edgewater Circle. I'm the principal circulator for the recall of Ms. Valerie Fisher. I posted an update on the recall on social media, and an individual made this comment. So the recall is over fundraising issues and not mask mandate shenanigans? This person made a very good point, and I would like to provide a detailed explanation of the recall. The recall of Ms. Fisher is because she did not follow policies. The recall is about the mask mandate shenanigans because Ms. Fisher did not follow policy 8401. With regard to fundraising, Ms. Fisher did not follow policy 1409. With regard to the book controversy, Ms. Fisher did not follow policy 6401 or 6405. Policy 8401, the development of board policy. No policy or procedure of the board or administration may conflict with local, state, or federal law or court decisions. The administration is responsible for informing the board of such conflicts and recommending appropriate policy changes to achieve compliance. The Declaration of Independence and State of Nebraska Constitution states, governments are instituted among the people and deriving the powers from the consent of the governed. When the Board of Education voted to give Dr. Rickley general authority resolution for COVID-19, the board did not seek the consent of the governed. Therefore, all mask mandates, guidelines, actions, initiatives, etc. are illegitimate. From Dr. Rickley's emails from public records request on papillionpatriots.org, he states the following, page 1. Hi, Sarah. Here's the document we discussed. Please keep this confidential. Thanks, A. From the email, the attachment, Mass Questions - Brett's Comments, page 2, item 1, the board appears to support a PK through 12 mask initiative that would include all students and staff. I lean a little more to PK to 6 mask required and 7 to 12 focus masking until it proves it won't work. The reason is trying to give vaccinations credit / incentive to the kids for getting it done. Item 2, page 2, item 3. Communication to parents will explicitly state that masks will be required of all students that do not have a medical waiver. Students who arrive at school without a mask will be given one. If they comply, they will be welcomed at school. Page 2, okay, so regarding policy 1409 fundraising, all fundraising for student organizations and school supporting organizations must have prior administrative and board approval. This is from Ms. Fisher on the Titan Performance Center public records text messages. Hi, just so you know, I was planning to reach out to you about this prior to receiving our most recent email regarding the space at South. As I thought about it yesterday, I do have a concern about whether or not board policy was violated. As a board member who has to hold others accountable to our policies, I repeat, as a board member who has to hold others accountable to our policy, would it be wise from the board perspective to have our board attorney review the policy and the specifics of the fundraising to ensure we would be in legal trouble?
Ms. Eby, that's time.
Okay, so my full statement will be posted on papillionpatriots.org so you can see everything. Thank you.
Next up for public comment on items not on tonight's agenda, Ms. Brittany Holtmeyer. Audience, again, I request proper board decorum. We want to get through the agenda, so we keep our cheers and claps and stuff to a bare minimum, okay? Welcome.
Good. Okay. Brittany Holtmeyer, 2007 Ridgewood Drive. Dr. Rickley, since you're so excited about your partnership business plan with UNMC and Children's, and you're so eager in recommending these experimental injections, like you guys are some literal doctors, I want you to be held accountable and want you to hand these out to every parent. You can find these forms and many others on the American Frontline Doctors website. This one is specifically regarding the notice of liability. So it will say, to superintendents, school board executives, school principals, teachers, and administration. This is regarding vaccines administered to minors under 18. This is your official and personal notice of liability. You are not a medical professional, and therefore you are unlawfully practicing medicine by prescribing, recommending, and using coercion to insist on the experimental medical treatment. Whereas, number 1, the Nuremberg Code, codified into U.S. federal law, prohibits forcing or pressuring anyone under any circumstances to participate in a medical experiment, and the code states the voluntary consent of the human subject is absolutely essential. 2, all of the treatments being marketed as COVID-19 vaccines are still in phase 3 clinical trials until 2023-2024, and hence qualify as medical experiments. People taking these treatments are enrolled in clinical trials. Number 3, none of these treatments have been approved, but only granted emergency use authorization, hence cannot be mandated, nor can informed consent be dispensed with. 4, most vaccines are trialed for at least 5 to 10 years, and COVID-19s have been in trials for less than 1. Number 5, no previously attempted coronavirus vaccines, MERS, SARS, has been approved for market due to antibody-dependent enhancement resulting in severe illness, deaths in animal models. Number 6, numerous doctors, scientists, and medical experts are issuing dire warnings about the short and long-term effects of COVID-19 vaccines, including but not limited to death, infertility, miscarriages, Bell's palsy, blood clots, cancer, inflammatory conditions, autoimmune disease, early onset dementia, convulsions, anaphylaxis, myocarditis, and antibody-dependent enhancing leading to death. Number 7, children and youth are virtually no risk of dying from COVID-19 or transmitting it to others, but deaths and injuries to children and youth have already occurred in the COVID-19 trials. Number 8, there have been more deaths from COVID-19 vaccines as reported to the VAERS than deaths in the last 10 years from all vaccines combined. Number 9, only 1% to 10% of vaccine injuries are reported to VAERS. Number 10, breakthrough cases of COVID-19 infections in those who have received COVID-19 vaccines are on the rise. Number 11, the trials have not been proven that COVID-19 vaccines prevent infection or transmission. 12, safe and effective treatments and preventable measures exist for COVID-19. Students are at nearly zero risk of contracting or transmitting the respiratory illness, are instead buffers which help build other immune systems. The overall survival rate is 99.7. Children have already been exposed to unprecedented amounts of fear, instability. Is that my time? Yeah. Anyways, I will post this onto our Facebook page, and I will send you guys also a PDF file, so that way when you are pushing this vaccine experimental injection, you can have parents fill this out.
Thank you. Next up for items not on tonight's agenda, apologize if I do not get the last name correctly, but Lorene, is it Renate? All right, I'm not very good with names, so thank you.
My name is Lorene Renate. I reside at 1108 Park, PARC Drive, here in Papillion. Good evening, and thank you for hearing public comments today. This is my second issue that I wish to talk about. I am publicly making a request for this school board to pass a resolution requesting the Nebraska School Boards Association to withdraw from the National Association of School Boards. Individual school boards use our local property tax revenues to pay annual dues to the State School Board Association, which in turn is a dues-paid member of the National School Boards Association. Because the National Association has asked the Biden administration to use its Justice Department to investigate lawful tax-paying citizens who complain to their local school boards about curriculum and regulations, have labeled concerned parents as domestic terrorists. The Papillion Board of Education should press the Nebraska State School Board Association to withdraw from the national group. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that concludes item A under Section 2 Communications. Moving on to item B, the Superintendent's Report. Dr. Rickley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lotus, members of the board. Thank you, as always, for our community for joining us this evening, and for those of you who are joining us via YouTube, thank you for joining your Board of Education meeting. It's terrific to see this outpouring of community interest and engagement. Several announcements and celebrations that we wanted to share. The first will come later, and that is the band accomplishment from this weekend. When I say it will come later, we didn't have enough time to pull together all of the final results, so we'll bring the board back at our next meeting, our first meeting in November, to formally recognize them. But it was too big of an accomplishment not to say anything at all. So of all of the Class A bands that competed this weekend, Papillion La Vista South scored best, and here's where my data might get a little flaky, but I believe this to be true based on the preliminary results. They scored the second highest amount that any Class A band has scored in the history of the competition. So not only are they best in the state, but yeah, really, really, really proud. So great job by our band program. Also wanted, I don't know if Assistant Principal Govier is watching the broadcast this evening, but Assistant Principal Jeff Govier, he's at Papillion La Vista High School, longtime district coach, teacher, and administrator, recently successfully defended his doctoral dissertation, so it is now Dr. Govier. He is the newest amended PhD that is joining our ranks. Also wanted to thank our foundation for an outstanding event that raised over $122,000 over the weekend. The two recipients of that gala, by the way, were the Student Services Fund, the Student Emergency Fund, and the Family Fund. One of those funds goes to directly benefit families and kids that are in a huge amount of need. And Mr. Danker shared an anecdote that just occurred within the last month or two, where a family literally drove up to the foundation with a carload of kids. The tank was on empty, and they were asking for help because their electricity was going to be shut off. And it really does illustrate how much need there is everywhere. This is a generous community. It's a giving community, but there's a lot of families out there that are hurting right now, and the pandemic, frankly, has just made it worse for many of them. So for this community to show up the way it did and write checks totaling north of $120,000 to benefit our students, our families, and our staff, some of the most vulnerable people in our community, sure says a lot about the human beings among us. Also wanted to share with the board that I took a little bit of time off on Friday to spend at the police station interviewing candidates for deputy police chief. Most of you are aware I was part of the interview committee that helped select new Chief Whitted, who was also honored Saturday night, incidentally. But Chief Whitted left behind his old position, which was deputy chief. So we interviewed 4 different candidates for that position, and I think in any time we'll have probably a candidate. But thank you for giving me some time to participate in something that's really critical to the future of this city. And finally, wanted to make an announcement that is probably the worst kept secret in the district, but we think this is the time to talk about it, and that is the impending retirement of Papillion-La Vista High School Principal Jerry Kalina. Now, Mr. Kalina had informed this board and had informed me personally of his intentions to retire at the end of this school year. Typically, administrators work through the month of June. And we held off a little bit because sometimes when leaders make an announcement too soon, they don't want to be a lame duck. We've seen that happen before. So Mr. Kalina submitted his letter of resignation, which the board took action on, I don't know, a month or two ago. But we really wanted to kind of keep it under wraps until Mr. Kalina was comfortable making an announcement in a way that both honored him and set the stage for the search process. So just wanted to make public in front of community and the school district Mr. Kalina's position and his intentions to retire at the end of the school year. Dr. Settles has been working hard to develop a timeline and has reached out to several different publications so that we can post that position. It is our intention to have a replacement named with any luck at all before we leave for winter break. So just before the community, the staff, and everybody that is watching this evening, just wanted to thank Mr. Kalina for not a good but an outstanding career as Monarch principal. We still have him for a few months, of course, but we're equally excited about starting the search process. We know that there's going to be really strong internal candidates, and we know that there's going to be outside interest as well. So again, Mr. Kalina, if you're watching, congratulations on an outstanding career, and we can't wait to name your replacement. And with that, Mr. Lotus, I would conclude my superintendent's report.
Thank you, Dr. Rickley. That concludes item B. Moving on to item C. Open it up for board comments this evening.
I would like to echo what he just said about Jerry Kalina. He has been an excellent employee and a great asset to our community, to our district, and I'm sad to see him go. It's going to be hard to replace him.
I'm going to agree with that. My daughter had Mr. Kalina as her assistant principal, and when he moved into the principalship, it was nice to have that continuity and that continued service to the district. So, Mr. Kalina, thank you for your service over these years.
I'd like to echo your congratulations to the band, and I know we'll honor them. My oldest daughter was a member of the band, and I know how hard they work for that whole competition. I remember all the blood, sweat, and tears, maybe not blood, sweat and tears that went into all of it for her, so it was amazing. I'd also like to congratulate both, the cross-country, I shouldn't say both, but the cross-country teams on some fantastic finishes, both individual and as teams this past weekend, and continuing that theme, I got to wish good luck to the volleyball and the football teams as they head out in the playoffs and state and everything like that. So got a lot going on here, so it's fun to watch.
No, I was just, you stole my thunder on you took my cross-country comments away from me. No, it was a great, again, they had a great showing, both schools out in Kearney, both on the men's and women's side. Turned out to be a bit warm, actually, on Friday out in Kearney. A little warmer than they would have liked, but it's still an amazing event that I was lucky to participate in way back when now, but it's still nice for them to get to do that. And it's just amazing that fall sports are coming to a close in a hurry, with cross country and softball being done, football and volleyball, now districts starting for volleyball, I think this evening, correct? So and again, listen to the band practice most nights as I drive home past the stadium, and let's just say that they work extremely hard, as you said, Mr. Bailey. They're out there in the morning. They go to school. They do their classes. They go back. They're there late at night, especially as it gets into competition season. So, to all my friends that had students participating in that, I know how excited you were and how strong the band boosters on both Titans and Monarchs do to support those large groups. So, again, thanks to all. And I was trying to think if there was anything else that I attended in the district last week. Weeks are blending together. So with that, any other board comments this evening? All right, seeing none, we will move on to item D, committee reports. Building, Grounds, and Finance.
Building and Grounds did meet last week, and most of the items that we discussed will be discussed later on in this meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Tafoya. Human Resources and Student Services.
We did not meet.
Thank you, Ms. Witt. And Curriculum and Americanism.
We did meet. We had some discussion on the ESRA application. We also discussed had some discussion around the district and state testing. That'll be discussion that will be coming forward later on our agenda. And then we also have tonight on the agenda the ELA adoption, and we had some discussion around that.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Fisher. All right, that concludes Section 2, Communications. Moving on to Section 3, Action Items. Again, under Action Items and Discussion Items, again, for public comment, total comments shall not exceed 30 minutes unless a majority vote of the board approves a motion extending the time. Again, 3 minutes per individual, and each person shall state their name and address for the record. All right, moving on to item A under Section 3 Action Items, our action by consent.
Make a motion to approve the action by consent as presented.
I have a motion by Ms. Fisher and a second by Dr. Tafoya. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Madler?
Yes.
Dr. Tafoya? Yes. Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Lotus?
Yes.
Ms. Witt?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Moving on to item B, the board meeting minutes of October 11th, 2021.
Move to approve the board meeting minutes of October 11th.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Witt and a second by Mr. Bailey. Roll call, please.
Mr. Madler?
Yes.
Dr. Tafoya?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Lotus?
Yes.
Ms. Witt?
Yes.
Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Motion carried.
All right, moving on to item C under Section 3 Action Items, the 2021-2022 school calendar revised. Dr. Setos, welcome.
Hi there. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to just direct your attention to the calendar that's in your packet right behind this page in our agendas here. If you wouldn't mind just taking a look there, and I realize it's not in color for you, but also posted up on the screen, we are talking about the November 5th and November 29th days. We've made no additional changes since this was brought to you at the last meeting, but just a reminder that these proposed changes would allow for the extra time for staff planning and collaboration, students to come in and catch up, or perhaps meet online and catch up with their teacher for things that they may have been missing from earlier this school year, and also allow for just some extra break time, some time for students, family, and staff to recharge as we head into the very busy time of the end of the semester, which would include final exams at the secondary level. So again, it's the November 5th and November 29th days. That November 5th did already exist on the calendar as a day with elementary students being off. It was an elementary planning day. This proposal does add that as a day for secondary as well, and adds an all-staff planning day for November 29th.
Any questions or comments by the board for Dr. Settles regarding this agenda item?
I'll make a motion to approve the calendar revision for the 2021-2022 school calendar to include changing November 5th from an elementary planning day to an all-staff planning day, no students, and adding November 29th as an all-staff planning day, no students.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Witt, a second by Ms. Fisher. Any further board comments or questions on the calendar?
I just appreciate that you went back and looked at this another time just to see what else we could do, just to give a little bit more in the calendar for our staff, a little bit more for our students and our families. So thank you for taking the time to do that. I think this is a good, some good changes, some good revisions to calendar presentation. So thank you.
Also, I did not understand the idea that students could come in and help catch up on their work, and I think that is a fantastic idea. We want to keep our kids up to the level that everyone is, and I hope this helps with credit recovery and whatever we need.
Yeah, thanks for that. We did tell you at the last meeting we'd be meeting with our student group for our superintendent advisory, and they, echoed those same comments. They were very positive about that. They looked forward to those times to collaborate with their teachers, whether it be online or coming in person, and had some nice thoughts for the administrators that were there as well as to how they thought they could motivate students who might need that time too to be coming in. So it was a great discussion.
And that it's early enough in the school year that they don't get too far behind. That's great. Thank you.
I should mention that some of those students are here tonight.
All right, seeing no further board comments and no public comments on this agenda item, I'll move for a roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes. All right, that concludes. Yep. That concludes item C under section 3 action items. Moving on to item D, the district mask guidelines. I will turn this over to Dr. Rickley and Ms. Hyman.
Thanks. Okay, let's start with an update on our COVID numbers. Same slide that we've had week after week after week, but just keeping our focus on what's really important here, and our number one priority is to provide our students with a quality education in person. It's keeping our students in our schools is our focus. Also to protect their physical, mental, and academic health of our students, our staff, and our families. Trying to return to normal. We keep trying to return to normal. We keep trying to return to normal. So that's something we're going to continue to do. And then, of course, provide those programs and interventions that address that learning loss that we saw through the remote learning program, and just families and the stress and the challenges that COVID placed on them over the last 19 months or so. So we know that what happens in our county is really important and is directly reflected as to what happens in our school districts. So once again, I want to provide those general numbers for what's going on in our county. You'll see the slide that's red and blue is our youth numbers. And that's the comparison from last year's numbers. The ones in red are from 2001, and the ones in blue are from 2020. So that's the comparison. The good news as you look at those numbers is that we're starting to go below from a county-wide level, both Cass and Sarpy County, we're starting to go below the numbers of where we were last year. You can see that as a community, we peaked in the September area, and now we've had a slowly trend downward, and we're kind of flattening off with those numbers. And again, those are just our youth numbers. The other chart in the yellow, the 5 to 12-year-olds are featured in the yellow, and the 13 to 18-year-olds are on the white. I think it's really important to note, and this is the same trend that we're seeing in our school district numbers, and that is that our younger youth continue to be the higher number of cases than our middle school and our high school students. So we're seeing those higher numbers at the elementary level, and again, these are community numbers. It's also important not just to look at the youth data, but to look at what is our county, the two-county region as a whole doing. Again, you can see that we peaked in that end of August, early September, and that trend is going in the right direction, exactly the way we want it to do. I think it's really important, and I always want to put this at the very end, the way the county keeps track of this data is it's when their test data is. So that last number there will continue to go up. It's not a final number, especially today, tomorrow. Actually, I think we got that this afternoon. So it's as up to date as we can, but tomorrow, Wednesday, they'll still have those tests that'll trickle in, so that number might go up slightly. That's our county data. So what does this look like in our school district? Currently, these are our staff numbers. Again, just a reminder for this chart that the white line is this year, the yellow line is last year, so it's that comparison of where we were from this year to last year, and the red bar between week 3 and week 4 was when we implemented the mask. Our staff numbers we continue to do really well with our staff numbers. They continue to stay very low, very manageable, slightly below where they were last year. I think the fact that 90% of our staff are vaccinated is certainly indicated in these numbers. We also try to look at those numbers from different levels to just monitor where do we have any issues, elementary, middle school, and high school. And you can see there's almost no difference between the different levels at the staff. The yellow line maybe slightly stays above the others, but for the most part, it's back and forth. So what do our student numbers look like? Our highest week last year, as you can see in the yellow line, was 45 positive cases. Again, we peaked in week 3, put the masks on, and we've seen a slow trend downward since we've put those masks in. I want to point out that week 10, where the number 5 exists, I just want to remind you that our numbers are reflective of school contacts. So if a school exposure, so if a student was positive and was in school as positive and exposed other students in school, they're in these counts. That week 10 was the week that we had a Friday, Monday off for staff development days, so students were not in school. So that naturally just decreases those numbers because you don't have as many days that kids were in school to have that school exposure. I will say the fact that it went up to 22 is a little surprising, but not totally surprising, because the other thing that we tend to see last year, and I think is reflective here, is that whenever there's one of those breaks, students are playing, they're playing in the neighborhood, they're in the parks, they're doing all sorts of sleepovers and activities, and then we start to see that spread, not necessarily related to school, but then we see higher numbers coming into our schools. But still, I would say our student cases, when you look at where we were from week 3, absolutely are where we want our student cases to be. This is the comparison by level. Again, not huge differences, but I do think it's important to see that yellow line, which is our elementary students, our most vulnerable students, tends to stay above the other two. A little bit of bleep here and there, but for the most part, it tends to stay a little bit lower. And when we saw the spike last week in numbers up to 22, 14 of those students were at our elementary level. I do think it's really important on this slide to point out that in all of last year, we had 136 students at the elementary level that tested positive. Already this year, in week 11, we have 162 students. So we absolutely are seeing higher numbers at our elementary level than we saw all of last year. This is a chart that we've continued to look at, and I think it's really important. I know there were some questions after I presented last week. This is not just COVID-related illnesses. This is all absences related to illness. So if a student left school for a golf game or because they're participating in some extracurricular activities, they are not in this number. If they're on vacation, they are not in this number. This is numbers of students that have been reported as absent that are missing due to illness and COVID-related exposures. So in a typical year, we see 300 to 350. That's kind of our range. That's normal. If it's at 350, we're not worried. You can see that those numbers spiked and then have really went in the way that we want them wanted them to go, and is still, I mean, we went below 300 for a couple weeks there. Last week we were at 310. So absolutely in that range of where we want. The reason that this is really important is because this has a huge impact on the quality of education. If you have 700 kids gone from the school district and 10 of them happen to be in your algebra class, that has an impact on everyone's learning. So the total number of absences is a really important number, along with those absences that are specifically students that have tested positive. So this is really important data source for us to look at. This is something new that I added. I just thought it would be really helpful for all of you to see this. Currently in Sarpy County, and this is just Sarpy County, our total vaccination rate is at 68.1%. That has gone up since the first day of school. So we went up 8%. So students and parents and adults and grandparents and everybody else are continuing to get vaccinated. It's a really hard number to pin down. I really tried to say, what is this for our youth? And that number just doesn't exist. But what I can tell you is that of all the youth that are vaccinated, 74% of all the youth that are fully vaccinated are at our high school level. So when you're just looking at those that are vaccinated that are in that age range of 12 to 18, the majority of the vaccinated students are at the high school level, followed by our middle school level, which would be about 25% of our students that are vaccinated. We do anticipate, and you probably see this on national news as much as we do, but the health department is very confident that those vaccinations for ages 5 through 11 are coming in November. Could be early November, could be mid-November, but they're definitely coming, is what they keep telling us. The other question that I've had a lot is, where do we compare to other school districts? And to quote Dr. Siri, I would say it's dirty data. It's not exactly clean data, but it's a piece of data source that we've looked at very carefully. What's happening in those districts that don't have masks? What are their numbers doing? The thing that makes that really hard, and the reason I'm not putting a chart up that has all the districts' numbers, is because different schools...
Excuse me, please. Don't be rude. I don't care if you don't agree with it. Please let her speak.
Is that different school districts count their numbers very differently. Some count all positives, some count only positives that are school-related. Some count them daily, so count the active cases. Some count weekly cases like we do. So the numbers are not consistent, and it's not a great comparison, but I wanted all of you to know that that is a data point that we looked at very closely. What I can tell you is that raw numbers of students now, if you think of the size of an OPS compared to a size of Papillion-La Vista or a size of a Gretna compared to a Papillion-La Vista, you're talking about a lot of different sizes, and the only thing we could get were raw numbers. But prior to mask, Papillion-La Vista Community Schools was nearly 50 cases above our surrounding districts. Now, that does not include OPS and Lincoln just because their size is so much bigger, but all the other surrounding districts, West Side, Bellevue, Springfield, Platteview, Gretna, we were about 50 cases higher than any other district prior to mask. 3 weeks after we implemented mask, those numbers dropped, and now we're staying very steady with those other school districts that we can compare to. I think one of the things that we should anticipate is that without masks, we might see a slight increase in some of our positive COVID numbers. I think that should just be expected because of what we've seen and how much below we are, and staying really even with some of those other school districts that we're comparing to. So all in all, what are we seeing in our COVID data? Again, I think it's really important to point out that we have much higher numbers at the elementary level than we ever saw all of last year. And our elementaries, and this also is true with the county data, if you look at the elementary age students, it's staying steady. It's not necessarily going up or down, it's just staying pretty consistent. So we're not seeing the downward trends with our elementary students that we are seeing with our middle school and high school students. I think it's really important to point out, and we look at this really closely, is that we have not seen school spread since we've put in masks. Prior to that, those first 3 weeks, we saw a lot of spread within our schools. We have not seen that since we implemented masks. The positive cases in our district continue to trend down. We did have that one bleep from the 5 to the 22. That certainly is something that we'll continue to monitor, but I really do think that that's explainable. And then, of course, positive cases throughout Sarpy-Cass County are also trending down, which I think is really important because schools are a reflection of what is happening in our community. And then finally, a high number of 12 to 18-year-olds are vaccinated, and that number continues to grow. So I think last week we were asked, what's the next step? How do we start those discussions about what the next step needs to be? So I put this slide in there as a moving forward slide. The thought is because our numbers are trending in the direction we want them to, because that overall absence rate across the district is trending in the way we want it to, because our vaccination rates are trending in the way we want them to, that it's time to start those discussions to begin that transition from masks required to masks recommended. The biggest thing that as we've looked at this and researched this and talked about it is that we want to do it right. We want to start slow. We want to continue to monitor the data. We want to make sure that we have a model in place in our district that works for our district. And a part of that model that's really important is what does that action plan look like as we respond to positive cases. If you think back to the beginning of the year, we were closing classrooms, we were doing all these different steps. We've really spent a lot of time, and I would say Dr. Rickley spent a lot of time talking to other districts about what have they put in, is it masking, is it more MPIs, what are the different steps that districts are taking when there are positive cases, and what should that model look like as far as our response goes. And then, of course, moving forward, we'll continue to hold those voluntary vaccination clinics for our students, our staff, as well as our families. So if we talk about moving from masks required to mask recommended. What does mask recommended mean? So our interpretation is that mask recommended, if we recommend masks at a particular level, it includes all students and staff at that particular level or in that particular school. It also includes all events held at that particular school. So if there's a community event or a band booster event or whatever the event may be held at our high schools, and our high schools are in the status of mask recommended, not mask required, then that event would be mask recommended as well. And then also as a part of the mask recommended, that doesn't mean we're getting away with all of our NPIs, our non-pharmaceutical interventions, because I think if there's one thing that I've heard Sarah Schramm, the health director, say numerous times, is that it's those non-pharmaceutical interventions that are going to make a difference as well. So we'll continue as a part of that mask recommended plan, we'll continue those non-pharmaceutical interventions like social distancing where possible, extra cleaning of the desks and hand washing, and then of course beefing up and trying to encourage people to utilize our screener because the number one goal is that if students are sick, we want them to stay home and not come to school. So those will all be a part of that mask recommended plan. The tentative timeline could be that after tonight's meeting, we move to masks recommended at the high school level, and then we monitor that. We see what happens with our positive COVID space, with our positive COVID cases.
Excuse me.
We see what happens with...
Excuse me. No comments from the public. Public comment is coming up. Excuse me. If we don't have proper board decorum, I do have the authority as board president to just clear the room. Okay?
So
I have more than enough board comment coming up. Please refrain until we get to that.
Masks recommended at the high school level, and then we'll see how that goes. I think one of the things that our district is really good at is monitoring data. So we'll monitor that data for the next week and a half, see what happens with those numbers of positive cases, and also it'll give us the opportunity to figure out the logistics of how are we responding to those positive cases. What exactly are we doing at only 2 of our schools instead of trying to do it at all 21 at one time? Then at the next board meeting on November 8th, we'll review that data that we've collected from the high schools being mask recommended instead of mask required. And if that data is favorable and points us in that right direction, then that following Wednesday, which would be exactly 2 weeks from the high schools, 2 weeks later, we'll go mask recommended at the middle school. Again, we'll study that at those 5 buildings. At the middle schools and the high schools, we'll watch that data, we'll see what's happening. And then at that December 13th board meeting, we'll have the discussion about what we're seeing in that data from an elementary perspective, and that gives us the opportunity to go mask recommended potentially at the elementary level. I think one of the things that's really important as we think about moving forward from mask required to mask recommended is what does that response plan look like? So at this point in time, it would be the response plan at the high school. The way we're visualizing that, and we've had a lot of input from other school districts as well as from Sarah Schramm on this, is that at the end of each school day at the high schools, we would communicate to parents exactly how many cases they had at their building on that day. So it would be, one 9th grade student or a 9th grade student and an 11th grade student tested positive today for COVID. In that recommendation, we would again continue to recommend masks. They may not be required, but we will continue to share that message of recommendation. And then we will also share from the Sarpy-Cass Health Department that recommendation on what they should be monitoring for symptoms. Again, we don't want kids, if they're not feeling well, to be in our schools. We want them to stay home, so it'll be reinforcing that message. One of the things that the health department has asked is that we continue to monitor that school spread, and that's really what this is about. It's not just about positive COVID cases, but if we have a positive COVID case, is it spreading within the building? So we will continue to monitor our positive cases by classroom, by group, sporting activities, clubs, cheerleaders, all of those different groups that exist in our high school. And if we're starting to see multiple cases in one of those groups, then we will partner with the health department to figure out what the appropriate action is. If we're not seeing those cases, then or if we're not seeing that school spread, then our plan for action would be we're going to use a percentage of students that are absent. So if you think back to that absent report, that are absent for any illness. So if we reach a 3-day average of 7% or higher of our students being absent for illness, that's not just COVID, it's absent for all illnesses. So as we enter flu season, that could be affecting some students, it could be strep throat, whatever it is. But if we have a 3-day average of 7% or higher for illness, then we will go back to masks in that building only, required for the next 14 days. At the end of that 14 days, as long as the 3-day average is below 7%, we'll take the masks off. So one of the things I think we've heard really loud and clear from our community and feedback that we've gathered is that having that clearly identified triggers of what would start masks, what would end masks, that's what we've tried to do with this plan. I will tell you, just to put it in perspective for you, the 7% for Monarch, that's 125 students. So if on a given day, a 3-day average is 125 students are gone, then that would trigger the mask situation. I did a lot of research to say, okay, what would trigger that? When we were in the height of COVID last year during November, that would have been triggered. If we can keep our numbers lower than they were during November of last year, then it would not be triggered. At South, that number is 134, just because their enrollment's a little bit bigger. I think one of the biggest questions, there's going to be lots of questions, I know, but one of the biggest questions we're going to get is going to be why not middle school now? Why just the high school? Honestly, it's a logistical issue. I mean, we want to do this right. One of the things that we heard from our principals is don't take them off and put them back on. And we want a model that's working. So we really wanted to start at the high school level. We know our highest vaccination rates are there in that age group, and focus on those 2 schools, particularly with that response plan. And then we'll adjust that as needed over those next 2 weeks as we decide if we should add the middle schools. We're going to continue to monitor that data, and then hopefully 2 weeks later we'll be ready to move the middle schools from mask required to mask recommended. We wanted to have some assurance that our model was working before we went all in with 5 schools. We'll add those 5 schools, and then we'll continue to monitor that. What about our elementary schools? I think it's really important to remember that we're seeing higher numbers at the elementary. I mean, we truly are. Compared to last year, compared this year to middle school and high school numbers, they're seeing higher numbers across the county as well. At the beginning of the year, we also saw faster spread at our elementary schools. And if you think about just the pure nature of an elementary school, you're with those same kids, same 20, 22 kids all day long. You eat lunch with them, you go to the recess and play with them, you're with that same group. Where with the high school, every 50 minutes, you're switching and you're with a new group of students. So I think that is why maybe those higher levels of spread we saw at the elementary school at the beginning of the year. And then finally, I think with our elementary students, which is why we wanted to hold off until second semester, is that we want those students to have that opportunity to be vaccinated. Vaccinations are an
Excuse me. I will clear the room. We don't have to allow public comment this evening. You guys have been great in the past. We've been able to get through this, and then we get to public comment. If not, we can just clear the room. Does everybody want to go home? I mean, we have we have further items we have to get through on tonight's agenda. Excuse me.
So as I was saying, we want students to have that opportunity to be vaccinated. I mean, vaccinations are an absolute family choice. It's going to be a choice for an individual, but right now those families don't have that choice. So if we wait until after first semester, families will have those choices. They can choose if that's the right decision for them as an elementary family, and then we can remove the mask as a district. At this point, I think I'll turn it back over to Dr. Rickley.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hyman. So just to be clear what we're asking of the board tonight, we're not asking 3 different action items, one for high school, one for middle school, one for elementary. We're asking for one action item, basically approving the timeline that is laid out in front of you. I'll go back and say something that Mr. Lotus and I had said as early as June and July of last year when we started talking about what this school year would look like. And that is, these plans can and will change. It's the nature of the pandemic. I wish I could tell you that we had 100% certainty with our prognostication, but the fact of the matter is we're only as good as the data we're looking at on the day-to-day, week-to-week basis. So these plans are preliminary, but based on today, we think it's a prudent plan. Ms. Hyman mentioned something earlier about whipsawing back and forth. Masks are on, masks are off, masks are on, masks are off. We don't think that's healthy for anybody. We don't think that's healthy for staff. We don't think that's healthy for the community. We don't think that's healthy for anybody. So we're trying to build a plan that's as sustainable and prudent as possible. The last thing I will tell you, and I suspect this will be reinforced in a few minutes in public comment, we understand for those parents that want choice, we're not moving fast enough. We understand for our parents that are scared, that may have medically fragile children, medically fragile family members at home, this is a really scary thing. So the fact of the matter is, the plan outlined here really makes nobody happy. And that's a difficult position to be in as a leader, where both sides of the equation are pretty upset with you. But as I've been told by some pretty smart people in the past, that when you're trying to find a happy medium and both sets of the equation are upset with you, then you probably found the right middle of the road approach. I don't pretend that this is a perfect plan. I don't pretend that this is the plan that we're going to be living with forever, but it's the best that we have today, and that's all that we can offer you. And with that, Mr. Lotus, I would absolutely answer any questions that the board has.
Any questions or comments from the board?
Well, I'll start with some comments. I don't have any questions. I think most of the board knows that I am a mask optional proponent, and I was a little bit hesitant to just do high school and wanted to have us go high school and middle school. But I do understand from the perspective of the district and trying to manage the numbers and everything like that. So I understand the challenges of this. But I also understand that there are other districts that have been doing this successfully, and their numbers are down low. So we have that we got that competitive thing, right? We have this information over here and this information over there. But I as a board member, have to look at it from our district's perspective. And I know a lot of people would say, you know, you're on one side or the other, and I'm really not. I'm on the side of keeping our students as safe as possible, because that is a requirement as a board member, is to keep our students safe. And the other one is to keep them in school. We know it's not good for them to be out of school. It's better for them to be in school in front of their teachers and with their peers. And that's the challenge, the dilemma that I find myself in as a board member, because I would prefer that we could be where we were at the beginning of the year with masks optional. But I'm also willing to say that the numbers rising the way they were was a little bit concerning. And now I want to see us get back to where we can be mask optional for all of our students and staff in a safe and productive manner. So I'm willing to say that let's start with the high school and move on. I do think that it's important to note, and I'm a firm believer in this, because I probably haven't said this before, but I live in a family where I'm vaccinated and my husband is not. I respect people's choice. I may not agree with everybody's decision, but I do respect other people's opinions, something that I think is not necessarily always happening here. I do think that there are people with differing viewpoints on this, but one of the things as a board member is we are not coercing or pushing anybody to vaccinate their kids. This is a parental decision. They have to make the decision because they're having to sign that consent unless these children are 18 or older. It's the parents' right to make that choice about vaccinating their children or not vaccinating their children. Just as some have chosen not to and don't believe in it, there are others who will choose to and do believe in it. And I respect both sides of that coin, even if I may not necessarily always agree with the information that's being provided. So I'm going to support this tonight, even though it doesn't go quite as far as I would have liked to see it go. But I do think it's a good start for us moving in the right direction to get us back to where we can be mask optional.
I'm going to provide the opposite side of that story. This has been a very controversial time and very difficult when making decisions that obviously are not aligned to everyone's feelings. No one is trying to take away anyone's freedoms or decision-making for themselves, but the superintendent and this board, and indeed the whole system, have an obligation to fulfill. Public schools in Nebraska are run by local control, but also have legal and statutory requirements through the state constitution and Nebraska Department of Education to provide prescribed K-12 educational standards in a safe and healthy environment, and each and every one of the district's 12,000 individuals is valued. While parents have rights to remove their child to homeschool or enroll them in other districts, online schools, or non-public schools, once a student enters a PLCS building, the responsibility for that student's safety during the school day and during school activities rests with the district. This district, like all others in the nation, has had to prepare for many unknowns over time, including fire and tornado drills, and in my day, civil defense drills, and now, sadly, active shooter drills. But this pandemic has created a new challenge to protect one another. The difference is that it isn't letting up, and we've been living with it and its variants for over 2 years, and it is exhausting. But we must persevere in order to safely return to a time before COVID. So why does the district have a rule right now to wear masks? There are rules about smoking in venues and restaurants in order to keep each other safe. And we must obey rules when driving a car in order to keep each other safe. And when the rules aren't followed, accidents can happen and some are deadly. In this district, a temporary rule is implemented to wear masks in order to keep each other safe. The CDC and American Academy of Pediatrics strongly endorse the use of safe and effective infection control procedures, including masks, especially for adolescents, and this is still their recommendation. It is encouraging that the district has experienced a decline, but it is not just about the district totals. COVID cases in the county, state, and nation are still relevant. The rate of infection in the state is still high at 10 to 15%, labeling Nebraska high risk, and Sarpy County specifically with high community transmission. Sarpy County is the third highest county in the state with over 27,000 cases and over 160 deaths overall. Right now, there are over 370 known active cases in the county, averaging over 53 new cases each day. With numbers still showing new cases and deaths, and with the holidays fast approaching, it is very likely numbers will spike again, and we know it doesn't take much for this virus to quickly spread. Even if I'm wrong, I do so gladly, for I would rather err on the side of caution than wake up one day having a lost child, parent, or staff member to this disease because we didn't continue this simple mitigation kindness we do for one another. Dr. Rickley and his staff have presented a thoughtful and purposeful plan that should be implemented at the right time. I agree with it. And maybe it happens in 2 weeks, and maybe it happens in 2 months. However, I would support returning to masks recommended and optional when there are less than 100 active cases in the county for a period of time. Therefore, I do not support this plan at this time, only due to the timeline.
Mike on. Any other board comments or for this evening?
Sure. First, thanks for putting that all together. I know there's a lot of data and a lot of information you've been tracking, and I know I'd like to thank the administration for putting a plan together and thinking through what that looks like and how we can, what we think is the best way to roll that off. And I completely respect opinions of that. Maybe now is not the time. I mean, it's just, again, you get it from both sides. I am supportive of it. I think we're to a place where I would like to at least give it a try at the high school level and see where it goes. And again, I support the doing it differently at the different levels of school. Again, I don't think there's a harm to watch for 2 weeks at the high school level, see what happens before you make that final call moving forward. So I support this, and I want to thank the administration for putting it together.
Just add my 2 cents. I want to thank you, first of all, for mentioning about the vaccinations, because I agree with that too. And I think, you get way too much, people don't understand that we're not trying to force and never tried to force vaccinations on anybody in the district. We simply offer them for those who want to do them, give them an easier method of doing that. I'm a veteran. The VA hospital does the exact same thing. I wasn't forced to do it. They've offered it to me, gives me a way to do it. So I appreciate you saying that. I appreciate the plan you've put out. I'm in support of it. I like the timeline. I like the idea of having some time to look at what the high school is doing and then go to the middle school. And then I really hope we see, I agree with you, I've been seeing a lot in the news. I keep hoping to see, vaccinations get pushed out for the younger students so they have an opportunity to do that, which would be fantastic to see. So at this time, I'd just like to say I support the plan as well.
The fact that everyone has a right to their opinion. And I do not think that everybody has a right to shove their opinion down somebody else's throat and demand that we change our thinking. We all are entitled to freedom of choice, and we need to be able to make up our own minds. If we do not agree with each other, if I don't agree with somebody on this board, we have a nice discussion. And when we get done with our discussion, whether we agreed or still had our disagreement, we still got up and walk out as friends with respect for each other. We do not have to think alike. This is the United States has changed in the last few years. They made everything politics, and politics is ruining everything. Why can't we just get along and behave, listen to reason, and do the best thing? We are charged here, the welfare of our students, our staff, and because of the fact that there are families, whatever happens to the student is also going into the family. And so it affects everybody in the community. We do not have the luxury of being subjective in our thinking. We have to look at the facts. We have to be objective. We look at the facts, we make a decision, and we have to live with it. Young lady, you have done a fantastic job as far as gathering data, presenting it to us, keeping us informed, and I do want to thank you for that. Dr. Reckley, you've done a fantastic job as being our leader, and I know you have caught a lot of static from it. A lot of it is undeserved, but it is what it is. It's a contentious society that we live in. I'm not happy with the society we live in. I enjoyed it 20 years ago. It was a lot nicer, but not now. But this plan that we have together is a very cautious plan. We're putting it together. We're not going to take off running with it. We're going to crawl with it, walk with it. Eventually, we'll be able to run with it. But we have to know what is going to protect our students, what is going to protect our staff. We're not going to do it if we just rip off the mask and everybody does as they dang well please. We can't do that. We're charged with the welfare of these students, and we have to make the objective decision, and that's what I'm going to do. I like the plan. It's a cautious plan. We can go. We can adjust anytime we want to, or anytime we have to. It's a good plan.
No, I would agree, Dr. Tafoya. It is a very conservative plan. Like many of the board members, we watch the data within our district, other districts, and the county almost on a daily basis. We talk to fellow board members on other boards on how they're handling their situation. within their district. And, you know, for me, from day one, you know, we tried to go masks recommended. That was the ultimate goal. But the end goal, the number one goal, as Ms. Simon stated in there, is to keep our kids in school. So this administration, with the support of the board, is trying to find a way, how do we keep our kids in school as well as still get back to a sense of normalcy? I know that's what everybody would like. We've been up here for since really late April, talking about masks, and really masks only, instead of focusing on the important thing, which is education of our students and staff in this district. So I realize it's a political sides. We're going to have folks tonight. I have stacks of paper up here that are going to be, we want to keep them on for as long as we can until it's safe. We're going to have the opposite side, that this isn't an aggressive enough plan. They've wanted them off since early May, and until they're off, they're going to continue to speak, and that is completely fine. But I want us to figure out a plan. I think this is a good first step. I'm not 100% sold on the overall plan. I think the thing that, again, I'm a data person, and so for me, I want to follow the data. We continue to see on average 45, 50 cases at the elementary school ages active each day. As Ms. Simon pointed out, that number has not gone down. We are seeing it at the high school level, so I can get behind at least trying. That's really what I was excited for the administration to present something. We have lots of discussions and with fellow parents at different school levels, and it always come back to when we didn't have a plan was, okay, if not now, when? When do we have the opportunity to go recommend it again? When can we do something different that is similar to other districts that might neighbor us, where can we keep the rates down? Let's not try to hide the fact that there are masks in those districts. They do have policies. Those other districts have policies similar to what was presented. If there are a couple of cases, they are masking up for a couple of weeks. But again, it's a short-term thing. So I was glad to see that as part of the plan, is what do we do when we have potentially a small outbreak? Because, again, the goal is, one, to not put them on, take them off, but to keep them in class as many days as possible. So I think, again, as Dr. DeFoy said, it's a very conservative plan. But I like the fact that, as Dr. Rickley said, this is the plan that's proposed as of today. It can change. It will likely change, depending on how spread happens and what we learn from the data to how do we handle those positive cases within a classroom. I got a letter on Friday. Good thing is it's monitored for symptoms. Everyone's a mask. How are we going to handle that going forward? And I look forward to the administration having some data and being able to further explain to this board how we're going to move forward and keep these kids being educated in the district that has amazing staff that is taking care of these kids now in person, majority of them going on 18 months. So let's hope we can continue their education and move forward. And with that, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion to ratify and affirm the updates to the district mask guidelines in response to COVID-19 as identified above.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Madler and a second by Dr. Tafoya. Before we call for a roll call, we still do have public comments to hear this evening in regards to the district mask guidelines. We will move on to that part now. Again, this section is limited to 30 minutes of public comment unless there is a motion and a majority of the board votes to extend that allocated time. Each individual is limited to 3 minutes. Your name, full name, and address needs to be stated for the record. Again, there's probably more than 10 in here. We will limit it to 10, not 30 minutes. Just there is transition time. We'll try to be fair, make sure that all individuals called up do have their full 3 minutes to speak to the board. Again, as discussed, can we please just maintain proper board decorum? There's going to be differing opinions. You support them. A quick clap, because we still have a whole nother section of items to get to this evening. So first up this evening, in regards to public comment, is Lynn Keegan.
Hello, Lynn Keegan, 10242 Emmeline Street, La Vista, Nebraska.
Thank you.
This is a picture of a feelings chart that my son colored. It was introduced by his psychiatrist. It is one of faces displaying different emotions. One of the first things that she said to us was that our son doesn't understand facial cues. This chart is used as a tool for kids like mine who have difficulty regulating and understanding their own emotions and others. My 4th grade son is developmentally delayed in social and emotional skills, and he also has low vision. In kindergarten, my son had extreme difficulty regulating his emotions in a school setting. He also had difficulty making friends, which he didn't do until 3rd grade. Through occupational, physical, and visual therapies, the amazing staff and faculty at Portal Elementary invested their time and their hearts into teaching. His IEP accommodations and our faith in God all helped our son, and he began to show amazing improvements. Until, however, this year, at the most recent parent-teacher conference, I was told that my son is starting to have some of the same behavior problems that he had in kindergarten. I hope and pray that my son is not regressing, but it is extremely concerning to me and drives me to research if the decline is connected to the fact that his already delayed social skills have been continuously hindered at school. It is easy to see that if a mask is covering a large portion of a face that he spends almost 7 hours a day with reading these faces is already a difficult skill for him, that it may be affecting his development. Here's just a sample of what I found. One expert stated, children who have more trouble identifying emotion in faces are more likely to have peer problems, learning difficulties. Preschoolers with poor face reading skills for their age are more likely to have externalizing behavioral problems like hyperactivity. If they tend to be shy, such children are also more likely to suffer from anxiety. I found several studies that showed similar outcomes and information. I do believe that as a Board of Education, you have been put in an impossible position. No matter what you decide, it may or may not put a child at risk for one factor or another, and you cannot know all the medical history, personal reasons, or religious beliefs that all the children in this district have. You cannot know, for example, that my son was evaluated and noted to be at high risk for depression, and he has already had and recovered from COVID. I believe his risk factors would suggest that his emotional and social development are more important and more at risk than COVID. Wearing a device for personal health purposes should not be a decision that a school board should make for every child. This needs to be a decision placed back into the hands of parents, not just for high school, but also for middle and especially elementary school students who are still developing these school skills. This may negatively affect their future. For these reasons, I believe that this decline in my son may soon be displayed in many children if we do not make changes. We have no way of predicting if we are not delaying their developmental and creating possible emotional and social developmental delays on a large scale. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up this evening, Sarah Laura Tooney.
So Sarah Laratoni, 8816 Granville Parkway, La Vista, for the record. I don't envy you. it's a very undesirable position to sit here week after week, day after day, and balance stories from mothers like myself and the mother that you just heard from, who are discovering social, emotional, behavioral, educational struggles in their children that are a result from the last 2 years. And you have to balance those out when we come at this from opposite ends of the argument. So I don't envy you, but I appreciate you for keeping my son in school, because we have spent this year so far amassing a team of occupational therapists, behavioral therapists, amazing staff and teachers at Parkview Heights Elementary, Miss Brakefield, Miss Watson, Mr. Guthmiller, all of his PE and art and music teachers that I had the pleasure of briefly meeting at Trunk or Treat last weekend. And they are all working with us to make sure that we as a parent can do our job outside of the school to educate ourselves and stay on top of what his needs are and provide the situations for him that are maskless. And we are able to do that because of the masks. My husband and I feel because of the masks in the school, because he's able to keep going and learning every day in an in-person environment, and learn things that my husband and I are not equipped to teach him because we are not educators. I am a secretary. I'm an executive assistant. My husband is a development director. So, we don't know a lot about teaching early childhood education. And I believe that the skills that he's learning in his weekly therapy, in his biweekly OT, I'll stop there. I will email you the rest of my comments, but thank you. I'm sorry?
Seconds.
Oh, okay.
That's just the 2:20 timer.
He's learning skills that will serve him well as an adult, of interacting in the world and having empathy towards others whose stories he doesn't know, and being able to walk amongst others, caring for others, and being compassionate. And I don't feel like I'm saying well what I'm trying to say to you, but thank you. I appreciate what you guys do. It means a lot to my family and myself.
Thank you. Moving on, next up for public comment, Britt Holtmeyer.
Hi, Britt Holtmeyer, 207 Ridgewood Drive. So I would totally believe this narrative that you just presented if you didn't host a gala with hundreds of people on Saturday. And Dr. Rickley, I did not give inaccurate information last time. They were not required by the school. They were recommended by the hotel. And normal, you want to get back to normal. Saturday did look pretty normal. And how do we get back to a sense of normalcy? Mr. Lotus, you host school at the Embassy Suites. This has nothing to do about a virus and everything to do with your checkbooks. Dr. Rickley, like I said, I did not state inaccurate information. The two-face, it needs to be stopped. I'm a little upset that Annette Iman did not provide me with the flu chart that I had asked for last meeting. Also, week 8, that was being presented as one of the highest cases. Week 7, you held a vaccine clinic for the children, and many had received it. Therefore, more than likely, they had gotten sick from the injection, and then the parents went and got them tested, which we know, once again, that test is faulty. And Annette Iman didn't have time to do the data for the schools that have no masks. Well, I did, just sitting there. Millard has a total reported cases of 55, which puts them at a 0.20%. Bellevue has 15 cases, which puts them at a 0.14%, and Gretna has 22 cases, which puts them at a 0.35%. And I'm a little uneasy with this partnership with UNMC and Children's Hospital. A partnership is the relationship between two or more people to do a trade or business. So what are you getting out of this business deal? And like I said, when I had called up to Children's because the online screener was not working for me, they directed me to the marketing department. when I had seen your guys' email being sent out on Friday, I got that from a mom who was pretty excited to see that masks were more than likely, hopefully going to be coming off. I sent her, I have a feeling. So this is exactly what I had texted her, and it actually pretty much goes with what you had posted. Masks will be recommended. Everyone is getting their flu shots, which they do shed, and they'll be passing those around. The numbers will then go back up, and then the masks will be required again. Then they will say that you have to wear the masks until a vaccine comes out. So this is just my thoughts on how this will go, especially since they're starting at the high school level because their age group is already getting the COVID shot. And I know Rickley is just so excited about this COVID shot, and that's right around the corner for 12 and younger. And that's literally what you presented. So therefore, put that on your record, and we'll watch it play out again. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up for public comment, Whitley Red.
Hello, Whitley
Welcome.
Red, 8823 South 99th Street, La Vista. I came tonight with a couple different versions of what I might say, but I appreciate that you've provided all of us and those at home with a straightforward plan with dates and measures of when, what will happen and why and for how long. So actually most of my questions have been answered. My one remaining question is around PLEC and the other preschoolers. Will those follow the elementary guidelines since they will not be able to be vaccinated being 4 and under? Other than that, thank you for expressing your comments and your support or otherwise up here in front of us. I know it can't be easy. And I will say too that I also have preschoolers that have social, emotional, and behavioral issues due to their autism, and they've excelled being able to be in person the last 2 years. The growth from 2 to 4 has been just amazing. So I appreciate you guys keeping them in person. It's helped tremendously. So thank you.
Thank you. Next up this evening is it Paul Print? Is that
Paul Plent, 10621 South 113th Avenue, Papillion. So the presenter who came up and showed the cases had inferred and outright previously said that your mask policy is working because cases are going down. And where's your control group to validate that statement? You don't have one. The statement's false. It's misleading. Majority of positive tests are based upon the PCR test. And the PCR test was never meant to be diagnostic. And anyone can test positive with the PCR test if you run it long enough. The inventor, Dr. Carey Mullis, the Nobel Prize winner, has even stated this. The test can be manipulated to create false positives in otherwise healthy people. It requires your participation, so don't get tested. The data that supports masks on children, mask use, and mask mandates is very weak. That is a fact. There's a significant gap in the quality of the data supporting mask mandates on kids yielding any benefits for kids whatsoever. That is also a fact. The data does not support any clinical benefit to having these masks on the kids. The best data and studies for mask mandates on children finds no evidence of benefit. And putting a mask on a child is a parent's decision, not a school's decision, not a school board's decision, not a governor's decision, not a president's decision. It's a parent's and a parent's only decision. You and your mask policy puts us in an extremely difficult position when our children don't wear masks anywhere else in their lives except to go to school to receive the quality education that Papillion schools are known for. The email to parents this past Friday afternoon informed us of a tiered approach to remove masks, like the other emails that also contained a notice of non-discrimination, which includes non-discrimination of religion. This board has rejected all religious exemptions to date. You are in the wrong. The schools must accommodate religious beliefs absent of any evidence. You cannot ask for us to prove it. And once you grant any exception, you must grant them to us all. And this board is working to prevent that. This board lacks any good and true morals to lead. Concerned parents came with facts, true information, and firsthand accounts of the detriment of these masks. A person who is demoralized is unable to access true information. The facts will tell you nothing, no matter how much information, authentic proof, documents, or pictures, you will refuse to believe it. Lies are now your truth, and you do so with the approval of your own conscience. We came here expressing our concerns that we did not want mask mandates, and 90% of our kids on the first days proved it. You did not listen to us, and now it's our turn to not listen to you. No tears approaches, full removal of masks, and this is not a negotiation. This is the message for the parents. This school board needs us more than you think, and your child's attendance is how they receive money. Kids get sick and will continue to get sick, coronavirus or not. Keep them home if they are sick, as you should. And 90% of us collectively decided that this wasn't as deadly as the corporate media has sold it to us. We sent our kids to school without masks. We can do it again, together. Stand up for your children. Be strong. Be an example of strength to your kids. If you sent them on the first day of school without a mask, I urge you to start to send them again.
Can you let him finish? Can you let him finish? I know you're supportive of him. He's trying to finish his statement.
We sent our kids to school without masks, and we can do it again together. Stand up for your children. Be strong. Be an example of strength for your kids. If you sent them on to school the first day without a mask, I urge you to start again and send your children to school without a mask beginning on Monday, November 1st. If we stand together, they will have to back down. There will be resistance, but it will be an eggshell resistance, and eggshells break under very little pressure. Share this message. This will be on the Pavilion La Vista School Board YouTube channel, and let's pump those view numbers that they want.
Mr. Plant, thank you. Thank you. Next up for comment this evening, is it John Byrne? Did I get that?
Name's John Byrne, 809 Redwood Lane, Papillion. And last speaker was pretty good. No, not going to be that good. I support the mask mandates. And one of the reasons is my oldest son has respiratory issues. And if he gets sick, there's a chance I'll be burying him. I don't want that. So, yeah, we're supporters of the mask. It's keeping him healthy. He's not getting any more respiratory issues. In his classroom, there's been one student who's already had COVID, and my youngest son in his classroom, they had a student who's had COVID. They took my sons out. I'm retired from the Air Force, Wounded Warrior. I took them to the base, got them tested. Luckily, they both come back negative every time. You got the flu season coming up, you got the holidays coming up here. We don't need the kids getting sick. They're going to have gatherings, large gatherings with their families, and I support that big time. But when they go into the schools, if they come in sick, the kids that had COVID at their classrooms came in with the COVID before they found out that they were positive. The parents got them tested, but sent them to school anyways before the results came in. So the stuff we're looking at right there. These kids do need to be healthy, need to get back to being without a mask. That'd be great for all of us. As long as my sons are having respiratory issues where COVID could actually kill them, or even the flu, and my kids have the flu shots now. My oldest is 5, and he has some speech delays. But that respiratory issue, it's been like this since day one. And they've been looked at and checked out through base medical. And they also recommend that they keep wearing their mask because it's helping them. And that's one of the things I look at. I can't speak for the parents here or any other family. I can only speak for my own. And I have no desire to bury my kids. That's not my job. It's their job to bury me. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up for public comment this evening is Megan Elkins. Welcome.
Megan Elkins, 1212 Buckboard Boulevard, Papillion. According to a study done by New England Journal of Medicine done on April 1st, 2020, concluded that masks do not prevent viral respiratory illness. The study documents how size matters. Viruses are 50 times smaller than bacteria and 1,000 times smaller than hair. The cloth masks you are requiring our children to wear are doing nothing to prevent the spread of SARS-CoV-2. The New England Journal of Medicine also states that HEPA, high-efficiency particle air filters, are 99.97% to 100% efficient in stopping the spread of SARS-CoV-2. This study also emphasizes that cloth masks are ineffective at preventing SARS-CoV-2 transmission, whether worn at source control or as personal protective equipment. Finally, the New England Journal of Medicine studied how cloth masks can actually retain moisture and provide poor filtration and may even result in an increase of infection. Were you aware that up until March of 2020, there was not one scientific journal that supported that masks could stop viruses? The school board continually mentions how vaccines will soon be approved for school-aged children. This leads me to believe that this is the end goal for the district to mandate this jab for all of its students. Is the board aware that there is no actual FDA-approved vaccine being used in America? The FDA played a bait and switch. The FDA approved a different version of the Pfizer vaccine that is not available in the U.S. What the FDA actually did was extend the emergency authorization of the Pfizer vaccine that is available in the U.S. With that being said, I would like to give you the latest VAERS numbers. There have been 839,441 adverse events reported. These include 83,412 hospitalizations, 26,199 people being permanently disabled, 10,179 cases of Bell's palsy, which is partial facial paralysis, 10,304 cases of myocarditis, 8,408 heart attacks, 2,631 miscarriages, 17,483 deaths. A virus that for most people has a 99.97% chance of survival, this so-called vaccine seems to be doing way more harm than good. In conclusion, it didn't start with gas chambers. It started with one party controlling the media, one party controlling the message, and one party deciding what is truth. One party censoring speech and silencing opposition. One party dividing citizens into us and them, and calling on their supporters to harass them. It started when good people turned a blind eye and let it happen. If you ever wondered whether you would have complied during 1930s Germany, now you know. All of you sitting on this school board blatantly deny the United States Constitution, the rights of citizens, and our God-given freedoms. I would no doubt in my mind believe you all would have complied.
Thank you. Next up this evening, Mr. Stritsky. Did he leave? Okay, thank you. Yep, and I will welcome back Lorene Renate again.
Good evening again. Lorene Renate, 1108 Park Drive, Papillion. I am testifying in opposition to the mask mandate. Integrity, does it still exist? As a little girl here in Papillion, my parents taught me some great life values. My mother would say, life is too short, and my father would say, your word is your bond. Since the cover here is all about the safety for children, what are you doing to protect and guarantee the safety from the damage and harm that masks are doing? How's the district's liability insurance? The FDA has designated masks as experimental for emergency use with no long-term safety trials for child daily use. Masks add no advantage, but they certainly have a negative impact. Some of the negative impacts are headaches, dizziness, lethargy, bloody nose, skin lesions, rashes and acne on the face, cognitive decline, exacerbation of mental and health, including anxiety and depression, difficulty breathing, difficulty learning, and oral health. We all know that children have the least issue with this so-called virus. There is a 99.x% recovery rate for everyone else except the vulnerable. Why are we not talking about recovery? Money seems to be the connection, and what motivates you? What's in it for you to keep the masks on? Not to mention the power and control to impose your will onto others. What are you doing to prove that masks work? I have yet to find a peer-to-peer study showing that homemade or store-purchased masks do anything to stop any virus. What guarantee have you made to protect these children against the oral health concerns? As a taxpayer, I am concerned about risk and rising costs and liabilities. Is the district going to pay for gum disease and other bacteria-causing issues due to the overuse of masks? Leave the mask concerns as a choice for parents with their responsibility and their liability. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Just got a couple left for this evening. Next up for comment is Ms. Dorothy Reyes.
Good evening, Dorothy Reyes, 1019 Conestoga Road, Papillion. Ms. Witt, you had made a comment earlier, and you said that the school district falls under the Nebraska state constitution, which you are absolutely correct. And under that Nebraska state constitution lies 1 through 4 freedom of religion. You guys are in violation of 8401 of your policy. Why is Papillion La Vista School District not accepting religious exemptions for masks? I mean, that's a clear violation. Apparently in our district, you feel it is our right to discriminate against one's religious beliefs. We are watching medical tyranny happening at our children's expense. This is pure evil. One day, all of you will stand before God and you're going to give an account for the decisions that you are making and that you have made. Because Mr. Rickley's actions and the board's inactions in supporting Mr. Rickley for policy violation and our community is divided. The good name of those before you, the hard work of those before you in building a legacy, the reputation of our community, your credibility, our confidence and trust in you is in jeopardy. Students' rights have been violated. Students have been discriminated against. Students have been suspended because they refuse to comply with the illegitimate rules. Complaints have been filed against principals because they follow illegitimate rules, and a board member is being recalled, which could possibly be the first time in our district's history. I implore Mr. Rickley, Mr. Lode, Ms. Witt, Ms. Fisher, and Dr. Tafoya to resign so others that truly care about our students and their education can take place. Our students deserve better than this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up for public comment this evening, it is our final one as we're running up under the 30-minute timeline, is Betty Mickles.
Betty Michaels, 2308 South River Rock Drive, Papillion, Nebraska. I'm here for my family, okay? I just don't understand why this mask mandate is still continuing to be a topic of discussion. I'm homeschooling my son because he advocated for himself on how he felt about the mask. And I pulled him out of school, and I'm homeschooling him now. I'm not an educator by trade, but I'm doing my best to be there for my son, to parent him. Why can't this just be over and done with? Gretna, Bellevue, Millard are also big schools, and they continue to be optional. We want him to return to school. We moved here. My husband and I gave up our military careers to move back to Papillion, to be close to family, because we knew Papillion was where we wanted our kids to go to school. He misses his friends. He misses his teacher. He has one of the best teachers this year. Everyone is living their best lives and normal lives outside of school. And yet, as soon as they get to school, they have to mask up. We are tired parents that have to deal with the long-term effects of this. You don't have to deal with the mental health effects of our kids being masked. We just want to live our life, and we can't continue to live life in fear. What happened to just giving us the option of just doing what is best for our families? That is it. That is all we want. All of us just want what's best for our families, and we should have the opportunity to make those choices for our kids. And that is all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right, that concludes public comment on the district mask guidelines. All right, we had a motion by Mr. Madler and a second by Dr. DeFoya to affirm the updates that were presented by the district administration. I will call for a roll call, please.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
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 All right, that concludes Section 3 action items. Moving on to Section 4 discussion and information items. Item A, our BCDM building designs for our projects at Rumsey Station and Liberty Middle School. I will welcome Mr. Richards to discuss these items.
Welcome, Brett. Welcome. Pat, how are you? Good. Happy to be here this evening to show you some of the work that's going to be coming out for bids in the next few months. So.
Yeah, but we are at a point where we want to review the projects one more time for Rumsey Station and Liberty. The addition and renovations scheduled. And Pat and Greg are here from BCDM to kind of cover that with you and answer any questions before the bids start coming out.
Yeah, I would just start by maybe saying we were here in June, and you've seen a lot of this in June, and it hasn't changed substantially. But now that we're getting ready, we received bids on the Liberty project this Wednesday. We received bids on the Rumsey project mid-November. So we just want to refresh you on what's in those projects so that that you're in the know as those bids are received. So we'll start with Rumsey, Greg.
Yep, absolutely. So Rumsey Station, we've got an addition renovation that is currently out on the streets for bidding to general contractors. The plan that's up on the screen there indicates two areas in blue, which are two additions. In the upper right-hand corner is a kitchen addition, and the yellow. I'm getting right into the floor plan here. This is more of a site plan, kind of indicating that the blue additions in the upper right hand and kind of lower right hand corner fit pretty well within the existing site there without too much site disturbance. So those two additions, as I started, is a kitchen addition in the upper right hand corner. We then kind of infill the existing kitchen below that on the plan in the yellow with kids club and needed storage for the school. On the lower right-hand corner, that blue area indicates a kindergarten addition That's really not adding any classroom space. That's a relocation of one of the 3 existing kindergarten spaces. That's required so that we can move the offices from across the entry to directly adjacent to the entrance for a secured entrance, like we're trying to get in all the schools here. So the kind of yellow area indicated in the lower portion of the plan is kind of renovating one of the existing kindergarten classrooms and the existing special education area into a secured entrance and new admin area. Then the yellow area up in the kind of upper left-hand corner there is moving the special education from its current location to where the offices currently are. So those are kind of the additions and heavier renovation areas. We're also looking at interior finishes throughout, energy efficiency upgrades with complete window and door replacements on the exterior of the building, as well as going to LED lighting throughout, and looking at a re-roof as well. So a couple of the renderings here. The upper left-hand corner shows that kitchen addition kind of near the existing playground area. And the image in the lower right-hand corner shows the kindergarten addition coming out adjacent to one of those existing kindergartens to the right of the entrance. This is slated for construction to be finished in kind of the fall of 2023.
Any questions about Rumsey before we move on to Liberty? All right. So Liberty, again, at the time that Liberty Middle School was originally constructed, it was always master planned for an addition to the south. So what you'll see in this first image is in blue, the proposed area of addition. I would also point out that we're adding some parking stalls to the parking lot that's to the east of the school. So it's a gain of 22 parking stalls there in the front lot. This is just a composite. Again, we're really not doing anything of consequence in the existing building. Obviously, it's very new, so the work is really restricted to the addition that's being constructed to the south. So a little bigger version of that. It's about 25,000 square feet. There are 13 classrooms and a special education suite within that space. Again, per the original plan, not really anything new to see here of consequence. Again, from the exterior, obviously the addition will mimic the building as it exists on the site. So fairly simple. Again, this project is we opened bids on Wednesday of this week. This is one that we had a pre-bid conference with general contractors about 3 weeks ago. We had 13 general contractors express interest. So very unlikely that we'll get 13 bids, but I think the good news is there's a lot of desire in the market, in the construction market, to do work for Papillion and Willis Community Schools. Any questions about Liberty? All right. The final piece that we wanted to cover, actually, it's a separate item.
Yeah.
Well, sorry.
Yep. Nope. Any board comments or questions over Liberty or Rumsey Station? Yeah, I just they both designs. I love how Rumsey Station, that it blends right in to the existing. Given that was kind of the pilot school for our current design, with the exception of 2 gyms, it's nice to see that it fits nicely in that footprint. And then Liberty, I know many parents will be excited to see the extra 22 parking stalls when this is done. We may hear a few comments about parking and traffic around Liberty, but I think it's just a testament to the good pre-planning from the original bond that built Liberty, that knowing when growth happened, we didn't need that space back then, but we do now. So good to hear that we've got lots of interested contractors, and hopefully they can be up to the task, and given current supply chain issues and everything else, be able to stay on schedule, as many have with some of our other projects. So, any other?
Just a reminder to the board and the community that these 2 projects represent 2 out of the last 3 projects on the 2018 bond initiative. The third being the team meeting room at Foundation Field, which Mr. Carson and his team previously briefed the board on. So Rumsey Station, Liberty Middle School, and then obviously team meeting room. And then we'll wrap up the remaining projects. So we are fast approaching the end of the 2018 bond issuance. We've made terrific progress.
Great. And seeing
Liberty Middle School, Dr. Tafoya, it will be a 3-team building, so I think typically we estimate enrollment between 750 and 800. Miss Siri, am I in the ballpark there? So 750 to 800 students, but a true 3-team unit. Each team would have between 125 and 150 students. So you have 3 of those for grade 7, 3 of those for grade 8. Did I get that right, Miss Siri? Thank you for the question, Dr. Tafoya.
All right, seeing no other board comments and no public comment regarding the Rumsey Station Liberty Middle School designs, we will conclude item A under section 4, discussion information items. We'll move on with our same group here for item B, Papillion La Vista High School construction update. Mr. Richards.
Yes, I finally have some good news for the board on this particular project. It's been a long, hard battle with this, with all the supply and demand issues we've had with this construction project, the uniqueness of the renovation, but I think we're on track here to get those kids and the administration into the areas that we want them for second semester, which is really good news at this point. Things have really picked up. 9th grade wing, the admin area will be ready here in the next few weeks, actually. So if any of you are interested in taking a tour, I'd be glad to take you around to those areas, and it looks fabulous, I will say that. It's just going to be something the community and board and district can be proud of over at Monarch High. One area that we did review and during the process of the construction that isn't a part of the project at this particular time that we would like to make part of the project is going to be a sidewalk going from the north parking to the south stadium field. That was left out of the project, and there's no real way to get to the south field currently without that sidewalk going in. We do have parking on the north side, but not near enough. Most of our parking will be, on the south side, most of our parking for those events with the overflow will probably be on the north side. So we just need a way to get those patrons over to that area. And with that, I will turn it over to Greg to talk about that sidewalk.
Absolutely. So currently, the way that it is set up is if you were in the north parking lot, you would go down the stairs at the bleachers into the track, and then over. We're showing kind of the new concessions building that's nearing completion. Concessions and press box building, they're nearing completion between the track and the turf field. This yellow path indicates a proposed sidewalk that would also include 2 sets of stairs due to the grade change there that would give the access from that north parking lot down to the concessions area and the level of the track and the new turf field. This, obviously, with the 2 sets of stairs, would not be the ADA access. That would still be as it is today from the south parking lot.
And that project estimate came in at about $83,000 additional. And we're not going to ask you to vote on that tonight, but we did want to give you the price tag on that as well. And we would recommend that you, of course, go ahead and do that when the time comes at the next board meeting to make that area more accessible for all our patrons. We also are looking at, and that we brought to the Buildings and Grounds Committee a couple weeks ago, was a new scoreboard for that field. Right now, we play varsity soccer and a lot of reserve football down there, and to have an appropriate scoreboard for the Monarchs would be something we'd also look to recommend in the future. And we'll bring that for discussion at the next board meeting as well, with some renditions and things of that nature, what that would look like.
Just a couple questions about the sidewalk. How wide is that sidewalk?
I believe it's 6 feet.
6 feet wide? And the funding for that, you said it's just over $83,000. Where is that coming from? Is it
What's
building?
that? I'm sorry?
The funding?
The funding, with the bond projects, and this is something that I've been reviewing here hard for the past couple weeks, we've come under in some of our projects, under the estimate value, and over in some others. But we believe this particular cost will fall within our expenditures for the bond.
Thank you.
Any other board comments or questions regarding this proposed sidewalk plan?
I just think a sidewalk is safer than sliding down a grassy hill in high heels. So I think it's a great idea.
And I would remind the board that this complex receives lots and lots of foot traffic, football, soccer, track and field, PE, band, and I'm sure I'm leaving out several other groups, but you'd routinely see in all seasons of the year, including the winter months, people going up and down into this complex. So having an accessible way to get in there is probably something that's really going to be valuable down the road for our students and our families.
No, I would agree with that. I mean, we've got to find a way to, the parking on the south side is extremely limited, especially close parking, and to have the overflow. And again, we got to have a safe, reliable way to get to the fields and the other activity space. So thank you for presenting that, and Mr. Richards, you and your team for identifying this potential need as we saw construction start to finalize. So any other board comments or questions? All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Greg. Appreciate you joining us.
All right, that concludes item B under section 4, discussion information items. Moving on to item C, board adoption of ELA state standards. Ms. Siri, welcome.
All right, good evening, Board of Education. I am here tonight to present to you a discussion item about the English language arts standards in the Papillion-La Vista Community Schools District. So basically what we are talking about is we are looking to adopt the Nebraska Department of Education state standards for English language arts. This would include grades kindergarten through 12th grade. And what I have for you here on the slide is the cover of that document. Those standards can be found at the Nebraska Department of Education webpage. They have a whole site dedicated to standards, and there is a copy of them there. I believe they're over 150 pages. So a little light reading. If you like English language arts, you're welcome to check those out there. Just as a reminder, as part of our accreditation process and as required by the law outlined in Rule 10, we are required to adopt standards for academic purposes in the 4 core areas. This includes English language arts, math, science, and social studies. We can adopt the standards that are put out by the state of Nebraska, or we are allowed to write our own as long as they are more rigorous and approved by NDE. We are not making the recommendation towards that step. We are looking to adopt the state standards. So what do we know about the English language arts standards? First of all, they were approved by the State Board of Education on September 2nd, 2021. This is part of their regular process. They are drafted by Nebraska teachers based on evidence and research on what academics should look like in the area of English language arts. And from there, they are then presented to the state board, and the state board has an opportunity to ask questions. And then from there, our state adopts them and recommends them to their school districts to be adopted. As you know, our curriculum evaluation and development process we refer to as Toolbox. This is developed by our teachers, and it's led by our 2 curriculum directors, Deb Rodenberg and Julie Sauer. They've been working with English language arts teachers as the standards are the foundation for our curriculum, and they will continue to align our coursework for all students in grades K through 12 with the new standards. Tonight, really, I'm just presenting the information to you, and then in November, I'll be back to ask for a board approval if that is what you wish to do. Some key features outlined in the standards, just so you know. Basically, they're broken down into 4 categories. Reading, obviously, is the foundation, and you can see there what they break out into the reading portion of those standards, along with writing. And this is kind of unique in this set of standards. They have also broken out the production of writing. So really trying to get kids to be critical thinkers and awareness of their vocabulary development and how they apply their writing skills. And then finally, speaking and language is also, speaking and listening are also included in these standards as well. To get further down into the weeds, the picture that I have here for you on the slide, this is what we refer to as the horizontal breakdown. So these are each of the subcategories that are found then within each grade level that kind of outlines the overall concept of what the standards break out for each of those areas. The standards are similar to the previous ones that we had. Those were last adopted in 2014. However, these are more specific and they incorporate more detail into the science of reading than the previous ones. There is also less commonality between comparison of grade levels. So for example, in the 2014 English Language Arts Standards, author's purpose was a standard that was at every grade level. These standards try to spiral and specifically state what does author's purpose look like in first grade, and then what should it look like by 10th grade. I think the standards are more delineated and easier to use. So again, that's kind of the overall broad look at the standards themselves. I do have a copy here tonight if you would like to look at them in more detail, or you're welcome to find them on the webpage. Questions that you have specifically on these standards?
I don't have a question on the standards, but and maybe this is a different subject, but when my grandson would bring home an evaluation sheet on his language arts, it would say that he was foundational or getting higher and higher and better skills. How does a teacher know? How are they given professional development to know if it's foundational or progressing or advanced to be able to score those sheets for those students?
Great question, Sue Ann. So in our district, especially at the elementary level, we do have scales that we have adopted as part of our curriculum development process. Those will be built as part of the adoption of the standards and the development of the curriculum. What that does is that identifies what does it look like for that particular task at a beginning level and so on to be proficient and the foundational pieces of whatever that skill is. From there, then we do work at PD and using our instructional coaches to help calibrate our teachers so that they are aware of what that looks like. We also try to provide anchor examples for them as well. Mm-hmm.
Any other board comments or questions for Ms. Siri? All right, well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, that concludes item C under section 4, discussion and information items. Moving on to item D, our final item of this area this evening, the RSP Associates Enrollment Services discussion.
And before Mr. Richards starts, this is a little bit irregular, so I just want to make sure that our audience members that are here and the people watching at home have a clear understanding of what we're talking about. So we are going to have a proposal. Mr. Richards is going to outline a proposal from RSP Associates Enrollment Services, and if you're home and really interested to see what they do, Google them. They are a firm based out of Kansas, and what they specialize in all day, every day, is helping schools build enrollment projections. That's particularly important for a district like Papillion-La Vista Community Schools that's growing, so that we can set an appropriate plan for where to build schools and where we're going to need capacity. Now, the reason why I mentioned this is a little unusual is we tried to get them to attend in person, but being that they're based out of Kansas, they weren't able to rearrange their schedule. So they are Zooming with us, and because of some technical limitations, we can't Zoom and broadcast on YouTube simultaneously. So the feed, for all intents and purposes, will end when I'm done talking, but what we're going to do is put the presentation on the district website so that if you're at home, for example, you'll have access to the presentation. And And the last thing that we think that's really important, particularly for our people at home to know, is the board will take no action on this. This is a discussion item. We'll see the presentation. The board will have the opportunity to ask questions, but we will bring this back and not take action until the community has had an opportunity to properly vet it. So we just wanted to make sure audience members and people at home understood how we were going to do this presentation. So with that, Mr. Lotus, I'll turn it back to you and to Mr. Richards.
All right. Thank you, Mr.